Now then, we've got a cringe video here, it looks like, where this woman's going to attack the country that she's living in for its history, which helped her, and she's going to pretend that she's now a victim. I've only watched the first minute of this, so we'll get into it.
The main reason England is in the state that it's in is because of mass migration.
Yes, not completely, but it's the biggest contributing factor at this very moment in time. Yes, correct.
Define the state, because that's a big thing. What do you mean the state?
The economic state, people are disillusioned, things are harder for people. Is it because of mass migration?
I don't think it's solely because of mass migration.
Yeah, it's not the only reason, but it's a big contributing factor, and at this very moment in time, it is the biggest contributing factor.
Is that the main reason, you think?
Ooh, never been asked that question before. I would have to be nuanced. Now, if it was terms of like social cohesion and community spirit and feeling disenfranchised for local communities, I would say that it's the primary reason. If you're talking economically, I would say that it's probably 50% of the issue, and then another 50%
of the issue.
I would say it's 50%. I'd say the other 50%.
Do you understand how England became great? How did England become great?
By beating everybody. That's other colonial powers and anybody else that was in the way. And as a result of that, we benefited the world greatly. The world is a better place because of the British Empire. Whether you include that as the Kingdom of England and Scotland prior to being Great Britain. If it wasn't for us putting Spain back in the box where they belong, subduing India and making them stop burning the wives, etc., the world would be a far worse place than it is now. But the Great British Empire, the world is a much better place now.
through thousands of years of constant fights and constant revolution, in not a bloody revolution, but in our minds and our soul. We come from a history of
through years, decades, hundreds of years of exploitation.
Exploitation. Well, you benefited. We gave you medicine, we gave you education, schools, hospitals, roads, railways. The list goes on. The things that we gave you, and we abolished slavery in your shithole country that you come from. Your country had slavery when we arrived, and it didn't have slavery when we left. And there's 56 other countries in the world where that is the same story.
Of developing nations?
No, Stone Age nations. They weren't developing at all. They were Stone Age nations when we arrived. None of them were developing. They were all pre-industrial. Even now, they're only just really getting into the industrialized stage now. They all come from shitholes.
When was that?
England.
When was that? Hang on. No,
That's how England became great.
Were we not great before we had any relationship with the slave trade?
Let's be honest. Let's look at London, for instance. London was one of the dirtiest, and I'm speaking in terms of just general economic.
Yeah, during the Industrial Revolution, but it was not. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, London was just as dirty as any other city, and probably less dirty than the sort of shanty towns that you would have come from in that age.
Maybe I can't give you, but London was quite dirty. Around the industrial era, people were living in poverty.
That's after colonialism, though. That's after the colonial period. And granted, the industrial period dovetails into the colonial period, but that's afterwards. During the industrial period, slavery was already abolished. We'd already dismantled the Atlantic slave trade by the time the Industrial Revolution occurred.
Compared to, so I don't think you can say England was great before then. England was great by.
Yes, it was. It was always great. Ever since 1066, England has been great.
Exploiting resources.
Even before 1066, I would argue. But anyway, we'll let this moron continue embarrassing herself.
I don't think you can say England was great before then. England was great by exploiting resources from all of the whole world. So I think it doesn't make sense for you.
No. I mean, the fact that we were great means that we were able to get ourselves into a position where we could, quote unquote, exploit resources from other developing areas. And not developing, Stone Age nations.
Well, then say that mass migration is destroying Britain when from England stealing from the whole wide world.
Yeah.
That's how.
You can't steal what's yours. We owned those countries. That was our property. The same with the sort of jewel that comes from India or any of these other things belonged to us. It was our country. It was part of our empire. It belonged to us. Cry all you want about it, but that's how it works.
They were able to build themselves. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, so I would say that any conversation about kind of the slave trade is
Not just slave trade, colonization, exploitation in
Okay.
India, in Nigeria,
Yeah.
in literally almost the whole world.
Yeah.
So you then can't say
The whole world, a third of the world. I mean, quite. Don't big us up too much. We didn't have the entire world under our grip. I mean, we did during Pax Britannica, and nobody would dare mess with us during that period because they knew they would get owned. But yeah, she's not making much cogent. She isn't making a cogent argument here.
that migrants are coming to steal stuff when you.
I never said that.
No, okay,
I mean, it's part of it.
okay. I don't mean to
It's all right,
praise you,
it's all
but you can't then say that mass migration is destroying Britain.
Yes, we can, because we can see it happening right in front of our eyes. You deluded cretin. He needs kicking out of the country ASAP.
When Britain destroyed all.
And I will say, right, I'm not an ethno-nationalist. I don't think we should just kick people out of the country just based on ethnicity. I think we kick people out of the country based on culture, which ethnicity is a component in, but not the only component. She is clearly not an English person. She has no English DNA inside her. She can go back to where she or her mother, father, etc. came from. She's unnecessary to the economy. We don't need her. She's just a burden. So kick her out.
Almost a lot of the world by stealing resources and exploiting them.
Okay.
To me, it doesn't make sense.
Okay, so do you know?
Because you have the IQ of an ant. That's why. That's why you can't wrap your head around these concepts.
Who started, sorry, not who specifically, but where the slave trade actually originated? Because I'm bringing this up because
I'm not even talking about the slave trade.
No, I know you're not.
I'm talking about
I know you're not.
colonization.
I know you're not.
I'm talking about what happened.
Man, the slave trade is part of the colonization. Slavery was a normal part of every empire throughout world history until the British Empire stopped it, and then it was not a normal part of any more empires from that point forward. What can't you get into that thick skull of yours?
In India, I'm talking about the
I know what
whole
you're
world,
talking
not
about.
Just, not just
I know what you're talking
slave
about.
trade it's just an aspect. So I'm not necessarily. We already know. I'm not necessarily looking to go deep into that. But if you don't want to, you
Yeah.
can.
The reason I understand what you're saying. The reason I want to open up this dialogue just separately for now, and I'll still come back to what you're saying, is because it helps me to establish your understanding of history. I don't mean in a patronising way, but I need to understand our sort of where I'm debating from. So it's important to establish that it was Britain that ended the slave trade,
Correct.
and it was North Africa that generally started the slave trade, to which
No.
Yes, you lying bitch. The British turned up with things like seashells or textiles to trade with the African slave traders who had enslaved their brethren from tribes that they bordered with, and they sold them to the British, who then took them to the Americas, dropped them off, picked up the cotton, took that back to the mills in Britain, etc. And it was a cycle like that. At no point did British people run around Africa enslaving people. That did not happen.
Okay, so I'd love to know.
Where? So you said that Africa started the slave trade.
Yeah.
That was.
I mean, yes, they did. The slavery did start in Africa because humans come from Africa. We all, I know the out of Africa theory has been sort of maybe debunked or it's under scrutiny, but as we currently understand it, humans came from Africa. Slavery's been a part of human history all the time. Africans started slavery. That's the logical through line of that argument.
Was Africa there was slavery in Africa beforehand, of course. Most nations had some form of slavery,
Yeah.
but no one
Oh, so she's admitting it. She's admitting that she knows that she's lying.
did it like England. England did it best, So
No, it wasn't actually. It wasn't
did
England.
Yes.
No. We never had slavery, and number two,
Yeah, that's correct. We never had slaves in England. From 1066 onwards, it was disincentivized, and nobody could ship any slaves from England, and nobody could bring any slaves into England after my days. I forgot his name. After 1066. Anyway, sorry, I'm completely blanked on William the Conqueror. Yeah, wow, that was crazy that I blanked on his name then. So by 1130. 1130, there was no more slaves in England. We didn't have slaves here. We thought it was something beneath us to have slaves. So there was never no slaves in England.
So you brought up slavery.
But for this exact reason, to try and establish this dialogue, because it's really important that England doesn't get demonized and hijacked as being a land of evil
So
history.
England did have slavery, but it's more nuanced. That's why you mentioned slavery. I didn't bring it up. I didn't bring up the slave trade. I brought up colonization.
I know.
I brought up. So what I'm trying to say.
I think colonize. I want to answer your question, but you're not letting me flow. You keep interrupting me.
Sorry to interrupt you.
It's all right.
But I'm trying to go back to my initial point,
Yeah.
which was that with
Which he's trying to address. Slavery is part of colonialism. He's trying to explain why colonialism was good, essentially. And I agree, colonialism was a force for good in the world.
colonization, England exploited the resources of millions of people and destroyed their nation.
And those nations are doing it now on their own. You think Kenya, Uganda, the Congo, Nigeria, you think they aren't exploiting resources? Come on, get a grip, you moron.
We not contribute anything.
No.
We contributed nothing with colonization.
Hold on. So my initial point, do you agree that England exploited millions of people and took and stole from millions of people?
Every empire exploited people. There's nothing specific to the British with this. If the Africans could have managed to get their act together and actually form empires of their own, they would have been exploiting people. And I'm sure if we looked at I can't remember his name. He's meant to be the richest person ever. Some guy from Africa. I can't remember his name. It's completely escaping me. He would have been exploiting people. Are we going to turn a blind eye to him? I'm sure Shaka Zulu exploited people. I'm sure if I typed it into Google now or ChatGPT and I got it to answer the question for me, it would provide evidence that Shaka Zulu or any of these other tribal leaders did exploit people.
During colonization. Do you agree with that point? Because you're bringing me back to different places, which I'm not.
I think there are elements of colonization which are truly grim. I do not deny that. But I think overall, the British colony...
I agree. I know what's going on. I agree. There is some parts like the Opium Wars stuff, which was bad. But overall, colonialism and the British Empire was a net positive for the world.
And what we achieved through conquering a third of the world is one of the greatest
What did you achieve?
achievements. We brought mass civilization, we brought money.
What does civilization mean?
It means we basically went over...
My idea is civilization is when you stop chasing the animals around and you stay in one place and you then get to build libraries, schools, roads, everything else. If you are still blanking on so many terms here, but if you're still sort of traveling people that follow the animals around and move around in tents and whatnot, then that is not civilization. Civilization is when you stop moving around and you stay in one place and start making buildings and services for the people that stay in that one location.
to India and said burning people don't necessarily agree with that.
Hold on, let's look at how England was around the industrial era. How citizens
After colonialization, yeah, she's confused. The industrial period is after colonialization. Yes, as I said earlier, it dovetails into it. One juts up to the other, but there is can point towards the two different periods, and notice there are differences, especially being that during the industrial period, slavery was now abolished.
normal citizens, most citizens live. They didn't live well. In London, for instance,
We had toilets, which is a great contribution.
You were throwing urine
for
from, you were
example.
throwing stuff from the windows. Like England was.
The poor were doing that, yes. But we invented the flushing toilet, or at least we reinvented it, because I know they found one in China, which is like 3,000 years old or something. But we introduced the world to the flushing toilet, which is in India, I think it's only got 50% of them still. 50% of people in India still don't have flushing toilets. So you're full of shit.
Wasn't the cleanest
Yeah,
place.
then we said we're going to invent toilets.
Yeah, but England. Let's be honest.
Thomas Crapo, I think his name was.
Let's be honest.
Correct. The flushing toilet, anyway.
Ironically.
England was not the most civilized nation, and that's why I
Oh, yes, we were. That's why we managed to we tried to civilize you goons, but it was obviously a waste of time. Same with India. Complete waste of time trying to civilize you morons.
asked you, what does civilization mean? If most of the citizens were living in poverty, we can compare that to some of
That still applies to all your African countries. They're all still mostly living in poverty, and they're all self-governed now. So what kind of self-own is this?
the other nations before England came. Maybe it wasn't civilization in terms of they are the most technologically advanced, but there was peace, there was prosperity, there was abundance, but
Lying. They want to pretend there was like one big hug box and like there was no tribal conflict or anything. And because there was, One of the other arguments that they would make is that Britain exploited these tribal conflicts to make them all argue with each other, so we could take advantage of that. So you leftists need to make up your mind which one of these two arguments you're going to like settle on. They're both wrong, but
not in the sense of the Western idea of what civilization is. I mean,
there's no Western idea of civilization. Civilization is, as I said, when you stop chasing the animals around and make permanent settlements. That's civilization.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So my version is civil. I mean, it's a different metric for everything. It depends where you're comparing it through time. Would you say we live in a civilized environment now? I would say we would agree with that, right? This is a civilized country. We would agree with that. Yeah. Well, I would say that what you're referring to in terms of the Industrial Revolution, we were still fairly civilized. We weren't in constant.
One of the most civilized nations, if not the most civilized nation. There would have only been people like maybe Italy, France, Germany, Netherlands, countries like that could have maybe held up their own to us. Maybe Japan to some degree. Yeah, I mean, at this period we're talking about, China was still like making everybody live in like little shanty towns.
Civil War, we didn't have like.
But the living standards of the average.
The living standards.
The average British person.
The living standards during the Victorian time were incredibly poor for many people.
Yeah.
The living standards during the Victorian period, the life expectancy doubled during the Victorian period. People started using medicine more, so it's a misnomer, and even he's got fooled by it.
Don't deny that. But interestingly, one of the ways we fixed that was through recognising that we want to pioneer in England and invent, as I say, something like
even during
the
the industrial age, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but also during the industrial age, the living standards were extremely low.
I know.
Yeah.
During the industrial period, the living standards were about 1,000 times better than 500 years prior. So I don't know what she's talking about. And even 500 years prior, the living standards in Britain would have still been superior to the living standards in Africa.
No, and I'm saying through that period, we addressed that in England, and we said we do have poor living standards. We've got cholera outbreaks coming through our water supply. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to pioneer and come up with ideas and technology to fix that.
I think. So you mentioned cholera. That's. I'm not. What can you go specifically?
No, she's like, I don't want to talk about these other things. I want to talk about the talking points I've got in my head and on my little phone.
Specific into.
I can try.
Because I think you're going from the industrial age.
No, this was
during
the Victorian age.
I
But
don't
if I'm
know,
wrong,
antibiotics. What are you?
if I'm wrong, because I'm not actually, my history on this is not perfect, so forgive me if I'm not accurate on this. But my understanding is that we had cholera outbreaks during the latter period of the Industrial Revolution, and we identified it because we started to realise.
And where did AIDS outbreaks come from, though? Let's think about that one. Where did AIDS come from? Which continent?
That people that were getting water from that cholera outbreaks were starting near water faucets or something like that. I think that was it. So I'm just using it as an example. It's just
yeah, the water supply was getting contaminated, and that's what happens with civilization. That's why we drink milk, because milk is sterile when it comes out of the cow. It's majority water, and it has protein in it. So that's why we started drinking milk. That's why we started making mead and wine, because all the water systems would be polluted. During the Industrial Revolution, there's obviously a population boom, people now polluting the waters even more, and then this is why you get cholera.
Just the way that we identified
I think the initial point that we touched on,
yes.
You said that England around that time was very civilized. I disagree.
More civilized.
Was more civilized than the nations.
I would say we were
more civilized, especially more civilized than the country you come from, I can tell.
Civilized than North Africa, yes, I would.
The whole of Africa, not just North Africa.
It's very tribal in North Africa. They kill a lot of people. They have it's a culture that if they want to have, that's fine. But I would identify that a lot of the culture within North Africa during the as an example, India during the 1800s wasn't as civilized. Let's take the time period of the 1800s
I don't think that's true. And actually, factually, that's not true.
It is factually true. You are a lying bitch. We need to kick her and anybody like her out of the country. Telling lies about history and trying to propagandize young people into believing this bullshit that she's saying.
For England was the main cause of most nations becoming destabilized. Most nations.
Wrong. We actually provided stabilization to these countries. Look at that. Australia, Canada, Singapore, Egypt, South Africa might be a bit of a bad example now, I suppose, because it's destabilizing itself at a rapid rate now, not because of the white people as well. But just look at like all the ex-British colonies. They're all pretty stable now compared to the ex-Spanish colonies, ex-French colonies. Like, yeah, I mean, like, a very example, look at Jamaica compared to Haiti. And then even look at Haiti compared to next door, the Dominican Republic, which was Spanish. But Jamaica, I would argue, is superior to both of those.
They had, yes, of course, yes, it was. Most nations had
No, you're lying. He's right. You're wrong.
systems they were able to govern themselves. They had systems. They were civilized in their own way. Maybe not, like I said, not technologically advanced.
Civilized in their own way. There's no civilized in your way and our way. There is one metric for civilization and being civilized. One metric that exists over the whole world. There's not different forms of being civilized.
But these nations were safe. These people had.
They weren't safe. You were in constant conflict and enslaving each other. You lying bitch.
They didn't have drugs. They had food.
Yeah.
So they were civilized in that sense, but maybe not technologically advanced. And that's why a lot of people think, oh, civilization means technological advancement. We can look at the industrial age. Yes, they were more technologically advanced, but their living standards were a lot lower. The pollution.
The living standards were higher. People lived twice as long as in Victorian London than they did in your countries, in Africa. So you are full of shit.
It was horrible. People didn't have food. People were suffering and struggling. And it was by stealing from all these nations, taking resources.
You can't steal what's yours. Countries belong to us. They were our resources.
Exploiting that England was able to grow to the position that it is in now. So that's why I think it doesn't make sense for you to then say, mass migration is destroying Britain.
Well, we're also, I know, I see what you're saying. I could go on for hours as to why I disagree with you, because we're talking about history in contrast to this sign now, okay? But if we want to not talk about this sign and a more reference to the history.
We are also talking about the sign.
I would say, okay, that it's important to note, as I established regarding the pulling of resources through things like the slave trade. The slave trade, as I say, was not started by England.
I didn't mention the slave trade. You
I
brought
know.
it up.
No, she really don't want to get into that because she knows she's wrong.
Trying to establish something before I move on to that conversation. North Africa started the slave trade, roughly speaking. It wasn't England, as in the state, as in the government at the time, who decided to go over and then just start getting involved in the slave trade. What was that?
Yep, he's completely correct. It was obviously the slave traders, which were merchants. So this would have been to our modern day equivalent, your Elon Musk's, your Jeff Bezos's, your Zuckerberg's, these types. They were like the billionaires, even though they weren't billionaires, but the rich of the time were the ones that went to other countries and exploited them and created things like the East India Company, etc. It was not the English state, and it was not English people, not my ancestors. I hear this a lot, that my ancestors owned slaves. My ancestors were miners. They did not own slaves. They would have never seen a slave. They would have thought slavery was cringe. It was something that like the Arabs did. We were better than that. So no, completely wrong.
Actually happened is places like Liverpool, incredibly wealthy men at the time in a high class of society decided that they wanted to get involved in the slave trade and it would benefit them. What happened was, please, I'll tell you what happened.
No, man, I think I've had enough of this for now anyway. I'm halfway through the clip. You can, the link for this will be in the description if you want to check out what other nonsense she had to say. I think I've ranted enough. She has no idea what she's talking about. This is becoming a waste of my time now. I think I've laboured the point enough. No point in listening to these people. She needs removing from the country as soon as possible, not because of her race, but because of her culture, because of her opinions, her ideology, and she's been corrupted and she's not English. So the ethno-nats are not completely wrong, but they are wrong in that we shouldn't be drawing lines just on ethnicity and kicking out people who aren't even loyal to Britain just because they're black. Anyway, leave that one here.